The door led to a stairway with steps of worn stone. Remi crept down them carefully. Candles had been placed on the steps which lit the way down. The further down she went, the clean masonry of the bootleggers' tunnels devolved into a twisting cave of rough stone until finally, at the bottom, the cave opened up into a massive cavern. What the hell is this place? The floor of the cavern was flooded, the water dark and still just the same as the channel above. Remi waded into the water up to her knees, the light from the candle flame behind her reflecting off the water and illuminating a golden path before her. The rest of the cavern was pitch black, forcing Remi to pull out her phone light. The light did not shine far and served only to reveal the gliding stalagmites that rose from the floor. Before going any further, Remi wondered if the man had led her astray. Did he really have Maya here? If not, then why say so? Was he just unwell and confused? Her blood ran cold at the thought that she may have just killed an innocent man. Yes, he came at her with a knife, but he may not have been in his right mind. There was a sound then, like rats scrambling across the floor. Remi spun around to find only silence waiting for her. "Maya!" she called out. She didn't know who or what else was waiting down here for her, but the water was cold and her legs were beginning to go numb. "Maya! Maya! Are you down here?" She heard the scurrying again and turned, waving the flashlight back and forth. "It's okay, Maya, you're safe now. I'm here to take you back to your mom." The chill had started to creep up her thighs as she heard a scrambling in the darkness to her left. She turned the light in that direction and regretted it almost instantly. What her light revealed was a pile of bones, and what she told herself were pieces of mannequins nearly as tall as she was. As Remi stared at the pile, the bones began to rattle and shift, and two eyes met her own. Remi leveled her gun, only to lower it again as the small figure crawled from between the corpses. A dark-skinned girl, her plaited hair tangled and matted, her large doll-like eyes wide with terror. "Maya, is that you?" For a moment, the girl's mouth opened as if she were about to speak, but all that came out was a choked sob. "It's going to be," Remi was about to say, as she took a step forward and stopped when Maya pointed towards something behind her. Gun at the ready, Remi whirled to face Maya's captor. In that moment, a white-hot fury had burned away whatever guilt she had felt earlier. A fury that was then dampened somewhat, when she was again greeted by darkness. Remi was confused for a moment, then she heard that sound again, the one that sounded like metal scraping stone. She looked down at Maya once more. The girl was still pointing at something. She was trembling slightly. Remi suppressed a shiver of her own and followed the path the girl's finger had been pointing, which she now noticed was aimed a bit higher than she had realized. Aiming her beam higher, Remi heard that awful scraping sound again, louder this time, and she caught a glimpse of some huge shape moving in the dark. "Maya, we have to get..." By the time she had turned around, the girl had already begun squirreling her way back between the corpses. "Maya, no! You'll get yourself sick." "Sick?" echoed a voice from the stalactite above. Is someone up there? Remi wondered. "Who's sick? I know sick," the voice said. Remi tried to find the source, but all she caught was the silhouette of something large and furry dancing one stalactite to the other. "Shit," Remi cursed, shoving her phone back into her pocket. The only light then was coming from the candles by the entrance. It just barely kept the darkness at bay, but it was enough. Maya had not yet fully crawled back into the pile, so Remi grabbed her by the foot and pulled her out. The girl screamed and thrashed about as Remi scooped her up under one arm and ran. She ran as fast as the water would allow her, all the while the voice echoed above her. "Look! Look, look, look! Where is she going? She taking the small piece." Remi had only just made it to the entrance when her foot struck something under the water. She managed to throw Maya towards the entrance as she fell and would have told the girl to run, but when her chest hit the rocky ledge, all the wind was driven from her lungs. The gun tumbled from her hand as she choked and wheezed. Remi blinked away tears as she watched Maya scramble to her feet, then freeze like a frightened doe. Half a breath later, the girl took off, scrambling upstairs. "The small piece gone." This time the voice came from behind her. Turning to face the voice, Remi sat down in the water with her back to the ledge, her left hand inches away from her gun. What are you? She asked. It came into the light then, crawling on all fours. Its body was a long, twisted mockery of the human form, with arms twice the length of its body and thick legs, half that size. It was covered in coarse green fur that hid the rock-like muscles beneath its leprous gray skin. Its face was wide and flat, as if a man's face had been smashed, its eyes smoldering coals. Most awful of all was the thing's mouth, a wide slash that split the creature's face in half. Its teeth were a jagged mess of black iron nails that tore at the flesh of its putrid gums, so much that its own blackened flesh hung in clumps from its jaws. Remi's fingers brush against the handle of her gun. Me? I have no name. It got closer as it spoke, Remi almost choking on its charnel breath. But the gods call me Asan Bosam. This is impossible, she thought as her mind raced, trying desperately to rationalize what was in front of her, but by then a clawed hand had already closed around her leg. Then suddenly the world was spinning, and the cavern floor was rushing away from her. The thing that called itself Asan Bosam had tossed her into the air as easily as if she were some toy doll. As she began her descent, Remi prayed that the water would be enough to break her fall, even though she knew it wasn't. Her fall then came to a sudden bone-jarring halt as a huge paw again seized her by the leg. She had felt something in her ankle pop, but that pain was a distant thing. Asan Bosam pulled her closer to him until they were almost face to face. They were both hanging upside down. Asan Bosam clung to one of the stalactites by his feet. His feet had clawed toes, 2 at the front and 1 that jutted from his heel. You let the small piece go, he said. But is okay. You brought me a big piece. His foul black tongue flicked out and plucked a strip of flesh from in between his teeth, then swallowed. Yes, you a big piece. I could eat you for days. Yes, I think I start with your legs and then the soft belly. The monster laughed to himself then. Oh. The laughter came to a sudden stop. Oh, wait. Why eat you now? You can bring me more like the small piece. His words came in a manic frenzy. Clever, who else clever like me? Here. Remi felt the blood rushing to her head as the creature began to hack up something shiny from the back of its throat. Asan Bosam spat gold into its free hand and offered it to Remi. Here, take the gold. Men love gold. It laughed again. Yes, I very His words were cut short as her gun roared and a bullet tore through the monster's face. She had hoped he would have dropped her, but instead his mouth yawned open impossibly wide and Asan Bosam howled in pain. She managed to fire a second shot just before the jaws snapped shut on her left hand. Remi fired a few more shots as the jagged iron teeth tore through her wrist, and all feeling in her hand had gone, leaving only white-hot pain in its place. Asan Bosam spewed a gout of foul blood that seared Remi's tongue and down her throat. Woman and monster wailed together in a song of orgasmic agony. For a moment the world went white and Remi was no longer herself. She was in the tunnels again, and in front of her was a man, dark-skinned, dressed in tattered clothes, his body bruised and beaten. The man was fleeing like a frightened rabbit, deeper into the tunnel. Pursuing him were shadows in the shape of men, shadows with hate in their hearts and blood on their hands. The man fled deep into the underground cavern where he was cornered by the shadows. As they swarmed him, the man cried out in a language Remi did not understand. But even though she did not know his words, she had no doubt that it was a cry to the gods. And a shudder ran through her, down to the very soul as she heard the answer. Remi came crashing back to reality as she broke through the surface of the water. Her shoulder slammed into the ground while water flooded in through her nose and mouth. Remi thrashed about until she was finally able to get her feet under her and stand. As she rose, coughing and sputtering, Asan Bosam crashed down just behind her, still roaring in pain. She only considered him for a moment before turning her attention to her arm. Where her left hand had once been, there was now only a shredded stump from which blood slowly oozed. Remi then squeezed her wrist tightly to stop the flow of blood as she limped towards the stairs. Pain racked her entire body as she ascended the stairs. The only thing keeping her going were the howls of Asan Bosam. She had blown off large chunks of the thing's head, and yet it was somehow still alive. When she finally made it back to the storage room, She slammed the door shut behind her and immediately got to work. She took off her trench coat and felt a biting pain in her left shoulder as she did so. Something was likely broken there, but she knew she didn't have the time to consider it. She then snatched up the knife that was laying on the floor, the one the stranger had tried to kill her with, and began cutting her coat into strips. While she wound the makeshift bandages around her stump, she heard the sound she had been waiting for. It was a scraping sound, like iron on stone. Asan was close. She finished tightening the bandages, then stood up on unsteady legs. She walked over to the shelves, unconsciously stepping over the corpse as she went. She began pulling bottles of liquor off the shelves and throwing them to shatter on the floor. When she was done, Remi picked up one of the lanterns that was burning in the room, stepped outside, and waited. She didn't have to wait long. Soon the scraping became louder, and a huge arm tore through the thick timber door as if it were paper. Asan began forcing its massive body into the small room. Still, Remi waited until most of its body was in the room, and while she waited, she caught a glimpse of the creature's head, where her bullets had torn through flesh and bone. She saw how the flesh writhed and knitted itself back together. "Monster," was all she whispered, just as Asan had fully emerged into the room. With what little strength she had left, she threw the lantern at him. Acting on what must have been instinct, Asan long arms snapped out unnaturally fast in an attempt to swat away the lantern. Instead, the lantern shattered and the monster's arm caught fire, which was made even worse when the burning arm slammed into the shelf which still held some alcohol. The creature was doused and the flames licked at him eagerly. And when those flames touched the alcohol on the floor, the entire room caught fire almost instantly. Burning, the creature flailed about the room, smashing more bottles and even the other oil lanterns. As the flames consumed him, Asan threw his arms to the sky and cried out, "Niame! Niame!" The air was filled with the putrid smell of rotten flesh, and when Remi could no longer bear the stink, she slammed shut the door and made her way back towards the collapsed archway. Climbing through the gap this time was a slow and grueling task that bruised her body and scraped her skin. But those small pains were nothing. Her left arm radiated a pain so intense that it almost made her forget who and where she was. When she was through to the other side, she stumbled through the dark, leaning on the wall for support. She didn't know how long she had been walking or how much further she had to go, but she knew she was tired and wanted to rest. But even more than that, she wanted a smoke. She tried reaching into her pocket only to remember that she had left her coat behind. I liked that coat, Remi thought. She was laying on the ground now, though she did not remember how she had gotten there. And as she lay there, clutching her stump of an arm to her chest, her only thoughts were of the girl. Remi had not seen her since she ran off, but she hoped she got away, hoped she would see her mother again. Resting her eyes for a moment, Remi felt a gentle falling sensation, as if she were a feather slowly drifting down into sweet oblivion. It was a nice feeling. She just wished she wasn't so cold. As she floated there in the abyss, she began to hear a sound, a steady tapping. After a moment, she recognized the sound as footsteps. Opening her eyes, she saw men standing all around her. She tried asking them if they had seen Maya, but they didn't seem to hear her. Oh well, she thought, closing her eyes. Maybe she would see Maya again when she woke up,